Hi everyone, welcome back to the Power Series. If you're not quite sure what the Power Series is all about, please make sure that you refer to the previous videos that's been created by the team. Today we're going to be specifically looking at creating a custom application for both administrators and users. Then we're also going to be delving into some of the custom functionality around the new app designer. That's going to be in regards to creating new command buttons, adding custom pages, and adding the relevant tables. But first of all, just make sure that you are actually subscribed to the channel, that you've turned notifications on, just so you can make sure that you're following all steps of the series. But for now, let's kick into the demo. The first thing we need to do is navigate to Make.Power Apps, select the relevant environment which we've created in previous videos. Ensure that you are in the solutions area, as we're always going to try and make sure that we create things in a solution. It makes sure that they have the correct publisher, and it makes them easy then to deploy in relevant upstream environments. So in order to create the applications, we're going to stick them in our particular solution because we've used the horizontal solution layering method. That's where we split things out per component types. So one of the component types that we can utilize is apps. So in order to create our apps, we're going to utilize the client extension solution. So simply open the client extension solution. When inside, you have the ability to create the new apps. You can do this by selecting new app. In this particular instance, we're going to be creating a model-driven app from scratch. As I said in the intro, we're going to be creating one for the administrators and one for the users as well. So let's go ahead and create the administrators app. You need to provide the app with a name, provide a brief description, so when the application finally loads up, we are left with a blank canvas. So let's just take a look around some of the navigation elements and what we could potentially do here. On the right hand side, you can see that we have the app name, which is the resource administration. We have a brief description, and we have the ability to choose an icon. Here we can select to use a web resource. You can select any given web resource that you'd like to modify. In this instance, we're just going to leave it as standard. If we click to some advanced settings, you can also see that we can configure a welcome page. In this instance, again, just keep it simple. We're not going to configure a welcome page for this application. And let's take a look at the main elements of navigation within this application. That's going to be on the left-hand side. So you can instantly see that right at the top, you can just pop that out and see what we've got. We've got pages, navigation, data, and automation. Let's just close that for now. If you go to add a page, you can see that you can add a Dataverse table, you can add a dashboard, or you can add a custom page. We're not going to do that just for now while we click around the navigation. We'll select the navigation. You can see that we've just got the navigation bar and what it gives me in group 1 and sub area 1. There's currently nothing displaying here because we've not added anything to this relevant area. If I choose to add, I can choose to add a group or sub area. This is what's going to define in the left-hand navigation. Then if I click into the data element of it, you can see what's currently in the environment and that's currently in the application. These can be removed, edited, and restricted within this particular app. We also have the ability to click automation. This is where we can choose to add a business process flow, or we can just by default leave it to include all business process flows within the application. So let's start adding some tables into our app. So we go to add a page, select Dataverse table, choose next. We can choose to have an existing table or create a new table. Again, try and use tables that you've created in the context of Make.Power Apps, so they've got the correct publisher and they're in the relevant solutions. Don't create them from this navigation menu. So you can choose to select your existing tables that you have there. In this instance, I'm going to select all the ones that are relevant for this resource administration app. Once we've selected all the relevant entities that we're going to add to our application, you can simply select the Add button. Here you can see now it's given some context to the application. It's added the entities that I've chosen to put into the application. Now we can start to configure the menus and how we'd like this application to be structured in regards to the left-hand navigation of the app. So if I click into my navigation elements, you can see that I have groups. This instance is called Group 1. But now what we'll do is we'll relabel this as client data. I also want to create some other areas alongside my client data. So what I'll do is I'll just add and I'll choose a new group. Within this group, I can call that scheduling. And within scheduling, we'd like to potentially add things like resources. So I can just move this down the application. And then scheduling will appear on the left-hand side. I'd also like to include things such as the users below there. And also we're going to try and include the bookable resource bookings. You can do this prior to adding all the entities to your particular table, or you can add them from the navigation directly just to make things a little bit easier and prevent you having to select things up and down. Just for ease of demonstration, I've just done it all in one in this instance. We'll also add another group that's going to be our reference data. So in this particular instance, we'll add booking status to that. We'll also remove this sub area as it's currently unused. Another useful feature of this designer is that you can add icons for the particular entities directly from this designer. So in the instance of the default one for particular projects, we can choose to remove that icon and use an existing web resource. This is really useful because it gives us all the web resources that are currently installed on the environment. So we kind of have access here to Microsoft's web resources. You can tend to search for something in particular and it will give you something suggested along those lines. So in this instance, we've got projects. That's probably not relevant. So if we just try and look for something else. So once we've configured some icons for applications to make it a bit more pleasant for the users and their experience, we can start to look how we can restrict data within our particular applications or restrict what particular users can see within that application. In order to do that, we need to check out the particular entity. So we do that by clicking the pages. We can see here we have all the relevant tables that have been added to our application. These are the only tables that are now visible for this application. In the instance of wanting to restrict the form for a particular user, you can drop down the entity and you can see here you can select a particular account form that will be utilized within the application. Here, by default, in every single time you add an application to the sitemap, it's always going to allow all forms to explicitly be shown. So what we need to do to restrict that is that we need to add an individual form. We can do that by selecting Add Form. We'll go to the form that's being created in this instance, so Account Power Series, and we'll make it so only this form is now used within the application. We'll do the same as well for the views. So if we select the account view, we can see that by default, all the views and charts appear in the application. In order to change that, we can just again select Add View. In this instance, we'll just do active views. So we'll go in for the active accounts. You can always add more in here at a later date, but you can always restrict it as well from the offset. So it's quite clear going forward. Now I've created my application. What I can do is I can just choose to save and publish it. A really useful feature as well within the application after it's been published is that we have the opportunity to play it. Here we can directly then interface with the application and see how it's going to behave for the end user. We can now see that we have a resource administration app with restricted accounts. In this instance, let's check that. So we only have one view that's available to us. And if I select the forms, we don't have the ability to choose multiple forms. We only have the ability to populate this individual form. So that restriction has worked within the application. Now that we've created the resource administration app, the only other application left to create is for the individual user. So the individual user is just going to see their individual bookings. So we don't want them to see anything beyond that. In order to do that, we just need them to see a calendar. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a bespoke calendar view for that particular entity. And that's via a custom control that we'll need to apply to that individual entity. So you can see here we've got the client extensions, we've got the resource administration app that comes with the app and the sitemap. So the next step we're going to take is to go into the tables and configure a custom control to enable a calendar view on the bookable resource booking. To navigate out of the solution, we select tables and choices. In order to achieve this, we're going to need to switch to the classic view because it's currently not available in the new designer. Once we switch to the classic view from the context of our solution, we'll be able to select entities, the bookable resource booking entity. We'll be able to select controls, add control, and here we can choose calendar. Now we can configure some of the properties. Once we configure the properties, we'll ensure that the control is visible on the web, phone, and tablet. Now we can choose to save and publish. Once that's published, we can head back to our table solution and we can configure the view that's going to be filtered down so the users only see their individual bookings. So let's click into the bookable resource booking entity. We'll click views because we're going to be creating a new view. We're going to choose to add a new view, and here we're going to select my bookings. Now, as standard with any view configuration, we're just going to add some filtering criteria and an opportunity to sort by. So here we're going to add some columns such as the booking name, the start date, end date, and the duration. And what we're going to do is that we're going to choose some filters. That filter is going to be where the owner equals the current user. This will now filter it so the current logged in user will only see the records that they individually own. This is going to be managed later on down the process by some automation that we put in place. Then we're going to choose to sort that by the start date so that they can see the start dates that are closest to them. And this is going to be relevant when they click into the individual calendar and they'll be able to see the view for that particular week. We can simply choose to save and publish. Now that we've created that view, it's time to go back and create the application for the end user. So we'll go back to make.powerapps. We'll go in our relevant solution, so make sure that you navigate out of the table solution, come back into your client extensions, and yet again, we'll go through the process of creating a new application. Again, we'll follow the same process in regards to adding a page, a Dataverse table, bookable resource booking. We'll choose to add, and again, we'll drop this down and we'll configure the forms. So the only form that they can see is the information form, and the only view that they are able to see, we'll restrict that down to my bookings. Again, we'll save and publish. We'll also tidy the application up a little bit by checking the navigation, changing the group name to my bookings, then also providing an icon. Resave and publish again. We'll once again verify this by just pressing play and seeing what the user experience is going to look like. As you can now see, the user has the default of the calendar for the bookable resource booking, and they only have my bookings selected. This will filter down to only records that that individual user will be owning. Now we've got our two apps created, it's important to note that your application by default is only available to system administrators and customizers. In order to share it to wider security roles, you're going to need to configure the settings within that particular application. This is done by going back to your solution for client extensions, selecting the model-driven app, choosing to share, selecting the app, and then within Dataverse, you can provide the relevant security roles you wish to access this individual application. We haven't quite got to that point yet, so I'm not going to actually configure anything within this application. We'll do that retrospectively towards the end of the delivery once we talk about the security aspects. Another thing that we need to try and look into is additional things that you can do within your application. At the moment, we've done some very simplistic stuff, such as adding some forms, configuring what the user can see, and changing some of the settings within the applications. Now let's take a look at some of the things that you can do to extend that app a little bit further. So what we'll do is we'll open our resource administration app. We'll choose to edit it again. Now we're going to take a look at some features. You have the ability to configure settings within this individual application. We've got some general settings here that you can configure. Some stuff in advanced settings, stuff we've already talked about that we're not going to expand on for this particular video. Then you've got the ability to choose some features. We've got some cool things in here, such as async onload handlers that you can utilize within your JavaScript. You've also got some features in here that maybe seem as preview. Try not to enable them for your productionized applications because they may be liable to change. But please feel free to navigate through this and see some options that you have available to yourself, because some of them may be pertinent to your organization or client that you're working with. You also have the ability to select upcoming. This is upcoming features that you may want to try and apply to your application and potentially look to deliver once they become generally available. We also have some enhanced navigation elements that you can do from this new application designer. You have the ability to select the account. Here you can choose to edit the individual account entity. You can choose to edit particular views or particular forms, or you can choose to edit the command bar. In this instance, what we're going to look to do is we're going to look to pop out a custom page with a custom command button. So first, what we need to do is we need to create that custom page. You can do that from the context of the application, because this is actually going to save to the correct solution that you've come from. So it is solution away. If you've come from your client extension solution and we choose to now add a page and go into custom page and then create a custom page from new, this is going to create within the same solution as our application. So let's do that now. So what we're going to look to do is we're going to look to create a custom page that allows you to reschedule a booking by a number of working days. This essentially is going to go off and trigger a Power Automate in the background. It's going to use the government website for the JSON to select bank holidays. It's going to negate those with a custom logic app, and then it's going to return you back an individual value, and it will subsequently push the start date and end dates of that booking. So this is advanced functionality that we're going to be touching on later on in the series. So for now, we're just going to look at creating a custom page and then associating a button to it to allow that to pop out, just to show you the additional navigation elements within this designer. Then we can start to configure our custom page how we would like it to look. Once we've configured our custom page, it's time to take a look how we would then add this as a custom button to pop out within a particular dialog window. So let's dig back into the app designer and we'll take a look at the resource administration app and then also look at configuring a custom button. Once we come into our application to save the updates from the custom page, now this custom page has been added to our app. We can choose to press save and publish. Now, in order to launch that custom page from our particular application, we're going to need to use that custom button. So in order to add a custom button, we go again to the pages element, select the relevant entity you'd like to add the custom button to, choose edit, and you can choose now to edit a command bar. We want this command bar to run from the context of the main form, so we'll select main form and select edit. As it stands, to launch a custom page from a form navigation, you currently have to utilize JavaScript, but you can run JavaScript functions from these new PowerFX command bars. So what we'll do is we'll select new from the icons. We'll choose a new command. We'll choose that we can use JavaScript in this instance. We're now going to need to add a library. In this instance, we've already created the JavaScript. We can run over this later on in the series when we talk about the automation that sits behind this functionality. But for now, what I'll do is I'll add the bookable resource booking. We'll add that JavaScript library. And then we'll choose to pass the function name. In this instance, that is called trigger reschedule. Because we're firing it as a custom button, we're going to need to add a parameter. That parameter is going to be called the primary control. This, again, is very simple in this new designer. We simply choose to add a parameter. In this instance, we can drop that down and we can select then primary control. We can now choose to save and publish. This will then create the command now that sits within the main form. So what we want to do is try to modify that button to make it a little bit more user-friendly. We'll start off with providing it with a relevant label. We'll also add an icon in this instance. And we'll also provide some accessibility. Once we've saved and published, we can then choose to run the app from within the designer once again. When our application is loaded up, then we can select the bookable resource booking and then view our new custom button. Once we come into the bookable resource booking, we'll open our individual booking, select more details. You can now see that custom button's appearing. Once you select it, it will pop out the custom page. This custom page enables you to run additional functionality you'd like to in the future, and it also has a lot of flexibility surrounding what you can extend the application to do. So that concludes all that we're looking to cover in this video. Please do look out for future Power Series videos where we'll be expanding a little bit more on the content that we've covered today. If you do have any immediate comments, please feel free to leave them below and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. If not, then I'll be seeing you in the next one.